So you can just go to customers and say, hey, would you prefer I spend time beautifying every single part of our application and all these 100 ideas we have? And they'd be like, no, I have this hair on fire issue right now. Could you please make 1, 2, and 3 work and easy and fast and reliable? And be like, oh yeah, sorry, I had a crazy thing for lunch. Yes, we should definitely do that. I'm Jeff Weinstein. I work at Stripe. I'm a product manager. I really love thinking about the people who use our stuff and what is their day-to-day, what's on their computer screens, what's happening in their life, what motivates them, what's annoying to them, what's the actual life that they are having, what are they trying to do, and then if there's a problem that's big enough that they're going to block their whole day to solve, that gets me really excited about how do we find problems that are big enough where you would cancel the rest of your day to solve. And if you can find one of those, which is hard to find, then it's worth devoting huge amounts of energy to solving that problem. And the thing I did wrong in the past is I picked problems in which weren't big enough to people in the world, and no matter how much you polish the wrong product, if it's not for a big enough problem, it just won't go anywhere. So now, because I've made that mistake so many times, I'm just completely obsessed with figuring out what are problems big enough for a particular group of people that they will cancel the rest of their day to solve.
It's so hard for them in the product.
Or just like in life, it's like, okay, so imagine, you're sitting around one afternoon, and this is a Stripe example, but lots of people from Switzerland are visiting your website and trying to buy your product, and none of them can check out. Well, you might actually cancel the rest of your day. Like, oh my goodness, we ran this ad campaign, we have all these new Swiss customers, and we can't accept their money. Clear my schedule. Hey, a bunch of us are starting a company. It's Sunday night. We just quit our job, and we want to pitch a VC in the morning, and the VC says, you need a real company. Do whatever the standard thing to get your company off the ground is, and none of us are lawyers. We don't have any money. We're just getting going. Oh my goodness! We need to figure out how to set up the company. Let's figure it out right now. Let's cancel our whole afternoon. We're looking for problems where you want to cancel your whole day to solve them. I got it wrong for a decade in a row, where I would build software for myself or friends that wasn't motivated out of no reason, but it was motivated out of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, or wouldn't it be a little easier if, or this is our pet peeve. And we would make traction, we would build products, we would ship them, we would tweet about them, get people to get excited. We had Slack rooms and logos and stickers and t-shirts and everything you're supposed to do, well-polished software that people used and paid for. But over time, I found it wasn't a burning enough problem for our customer base such that they had willingness to pay and make an economically viable company for the long term. And when I look back on those errors, they weren't errors of execution, they were errors of strategy and picking the wrong problem. So now I'm completely obsessed with finding a problem that's big enough that if you solve it, you will be happy you completely solved it, rather than a problem that's a little bit of a problem for customers, and then even if you completely have solved it, who really cares? You want to pick something that's juicy enough to work on for a really long time. So the situation was we had built a piece of software that hundreds of people used every day, which is hard to do. It's hard to make something that people would care enough to trust, especially when it's a business critical thing, which it was for people writing analytic code against to answer questions. And we made a error one day, and we basically bricked the app where it was down, people couldn't access it, and of course our small team hustled to fix it. So we fixed it a couple hours later, and we sent out an email hey everyone, so sorry we were down. All of your data has been saved. Log back in. You can keep going. And we kind of patted ourselves on the back and celebrated that we're able to have fixed this incident, this error, relatively quickly. But it wasn't until a year later I realized how much I had missed the message, which is that while we were down, customers weren't screaming. They weren't flipping their tables over saying, we need this service back up. We got a couple emails. I got like a text message from a friend being like, hey, I think it's down. And it took me an extra year to have realized that was certainly one of the strongest moments I should have realized that we were not solving a burning enough pain point. Because when something is actually critical, the second it's down, you will drive to the service and bang on the door and say, we need this thing back up. That was a hard lesson to learn because I spent another year of work and millions of VC dollars and all of our time. And it was a good use of time to build it, but I look back on it and I can only blame the fact that we didn't pick a problem burning enough to solve.
One thing we're trying to understand at Linear is, what does it feel like for builders to be working on these things? Like, what does it actually feel like for an individual?
It feels like you're always behind, because if you are building something if you're solving a problem that's painful enough for someone, they are going to want it with an incredible heat. And they'll take 10% of it being solved and they'll take 20% of it being solved, and then they'll take 100% of it being solved, and then they'll want twice as much of it solved. It's sort of infinite how much you will want a complicated thing solved. And so if you find one of those things, you always feel behind. Now, so it's this complicated feeling of urgency because you're really hearing an incredibly on fire problem from a group of people that hopefully you like. I mean, hopefully you're serving a group of people that you like to serve. And that's kind of what good feels like, is always being behind.
It sounds like you're solving a problem that could take like 20 years to solve, and then maybe there's like a short-term thing you can do to make something like slightly easier. What's the day-to-day feel like of tackling a problem that big?
We just have to turn everything into something incremental. You know, you have to give. I mean, day to day, it's small groups of people getting together to build, design, support, sell, whatever it is you're working on. So for us, it tends to be, at Stripe, it tends to be software. It tends to be software for technical people. And in that case, it's early in the process, it's getting in the Google Doc with the customer directly and writing out, hey, if we had the API work in X, Y, and Z ways, and with these kinds of responses, would that work with your system? And then the customer just immediately in Google Doc comments, just, nope, it wouldn't work. I need it exactly like 1, 2, and 3. And you know, in comparison to 10 months of work and some big product launch and then going to the customer and the customer's kind of scratching their head, oh, I wish you had asked me earlier. So we try to day-to-day be in it with customers as directly and as iteratively as possible. And so that when you later can do the fun PR announcements and the tweets and the GIFs, it of course feels natural. And of course it feels as if, oh, they must have been working on this forever. Oh yes, that's because we were working on it forever. A lot of times people are like, oh, I can't believe how quickly Stripe is shipping. Like, wow, it feels like we're shipping so slowly. You know, we're constantly behind. But it's because we're trying to do as much of that work up front so that when stuff goes out to the full internet, it feels like hand in glove, and that takes a lot of time prior. Whereas if you're working on something that's not super burning for that audience, it's inorganic because the problem isn't big enough that it's pulling you. You're kind of pushing your solution, you're pitching, and it's exhausting to pitch. It doesn't feel natural. So when I find myself switching to this like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we did X, Y, and Z, and the customer is like, not really. I'm like, oh shoot, I'm pitching again, when I really just be like listening. What's their next biggest, most important problem? And then wait for them to kind of spill their beans and then just solve whatever that is.
Do you know while you're doing it that you're about to build something great?
Yeah, you have a sense, you could have a sense quickly if it's going to matter to people. I don't know if it'll be great or not. It's sort of up to the customer to tell us that it's great, but you can get a sense of when you're building something, if you put it out, is it going to resonate with people that it's going to solve their problem? And often it's little things, how quickly they email you back when you tell them about it, or the meeting is scheduled for 30 minutes to review the first version of it, and they want to go 60 minutes to keep going, or they are texting you late at night with ideas for how it could be better, or if they want to join your team because they play with the versions. Like, then you can start, oh my goodness, we've tapped into something that's going to matter to people, and then it's really up to us to make it great. That's sort of a next thing to do. But again, the worst failure is to try to make something great that no one cares about. Like the thing you have to really focus on is finding something that people care about, and then, okay, you can sort of take it to great. But I think the vast majority of failure modes are attempting to polish something that shouldn't have existed in the first place. And you can see this a lot on the internet, which is that cool things get shipped, and then you wait, and then a few months, weeks later, years later, hi, sorry, we're shutting this down. It was a fun idea. You're like, oh my goodness, it was such good software. Like, well, but now it's done. And so you got to find stuff that people really want, to the point where the likelihood of having to send out the, hey, I'm sorry, we built cool stuff, it's no longer running, is low. And I've for sure been in both camps. I've definitely sent out that message. If you want your project or company to last a while, it's going to have to be self-sustaining at some point. And I don't know how else to make something self-sustaining than to have customers pay for it. And customers are smart. They have a lot of alternatives in the world, and so they will pay for things that solve their problem. And they tend not to pay a lot of money for when you solve problem 38 that they have. They tend to pay a lot of money and love the software that solves problem 1 or 2. That's like a timeless thing, and just actually a piece of mathematical economics. You just can't run an operation of people for an extended period of time without making it self-sustaining in some way.
Does it have to be a high quality thing in order to solve the problem? Or is there like some baseline that's like before it's considered quality that still gets the job done?
If you pick some problem that's worth solving, and you kind of you narrow into the core problem of it, it actually makes it easier to make it high quality, because you're no longer having to polish all the corners of all possible things. You've focused yourself on something that's relatively smaller than if you're kind of just building something in the ether. And then now that you have that kind of focus, it's just so much easier to build something that is purposeful and feels great to who's using it, when you have deeply focused what it is, who you're building it for, and what it really needs to solve. And so I kind of think of it as like function, like craft and beauty. Like, we need to make things that are deeply functional to the audience and completely solves their problem. And then we want to make things that feel great to use. The same, we're not talking about balloons kind of sparkling off when something fun happens in the app. It's just the day-to-day usage of whatever you're building. Does it feel like an auteur built it for you? Especially for earlier stage businesses that might not have as much, might just be earlier. They haven't earned as much trust yet for their audience. People do associate well-designed and beautiful things with things that will work, because you have this, I think, reasonable assumption that if some group of people went to the lengths of getting it to look good, feel right, kind of connote that it will work, that it actually is denoting that it will work.
Even with an incredible team that Stripe has and tons of resources, like, what gets in the way of building quality products? Whether it's in the day-to-day or maybe it's a more macro thing. Yeah, what's hard about this?
Building anything good is hard the way anything hard is hard. You just have to keep doing it over a long period of time. In some ways, you just have to remind yourself, oh goodness, like, we're supposed to keep working this hard. It doesn't always get easier the more you do it. I was building startup stuff at exactly the same moment that the founders of Stripe started Stripe. Mm-hmm. And that somewhat inspires and haunts me, because with the same exact information, I worked on something much less interesting and important. Whereas they bumped into the fact that there wasn't an easy way to accept money on the internet as a developer, and said, that's strange. Maybe I'll Google for it more and see if it really exists. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't exist? uh-oh, maybe that's us. Whereas I was like, I guess that's the way the world is.
Totally.
And it's a hard lesson. I wasn't gonna go build Stripe myself. Their talents are very useful for the problem. But now I'm incredibly sensitive to every single problem I kind of personally face and hear. I'm like, oh my goodness, we might stumble into the next big thing if we're just listening with empathy and really trying to understand how it feels for something not to work. And you got to get out of your own body for that. But I have one cheat, which is just get on the phone with our customers and just sit there in silence. That totally gets me out of my own head. Because
what do you mean sit in silence? Like, you ask a prompt and then you just...
No, I'll call and just sit there. I'll email them, say, hey, how's your business going? And they're like, cool, yeah, we're busy. We just raised money and hiring people and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, awesome. You want to just catch up? Like, great. Let's catch up 1:30 next Tuesday on Zoom. The Zoom starts. Hey, how's it going?
Do you think they start talking to you about Stripe stuff because they know you'll probably want to hear it?
I don't want to hear about Stripe stuff.
Oh, okay.
I want to hear about what is the blocking constraint of their success. Some of the things we can't help with. Stripe is not likely to get into the healthcare game immediately. Though if you love your customer, I'm happy to recommend a healthcare startup to them, and I can help solve their problem that earns trust and it's just fun to do. And hopefully they're all Stripe customers, whatever, that's great. But at some point you're going to hear something that is closer to your sphere of influence. And so limiting the conversation to, I want Stripe feedback, or I want feedback on my product, or I want to tell you about an update to my product, is an incredibly internal focus and is disrespectful to the customer, and is of course not going to help what you're building either, but it's just very natural for some reason for people to do so. Hi, I'd like to tell you about my thing. Again, people are on their back foot. You're being pitched. You're immediately in, what is this person selling me mode? And I'd rather just take it the complete opposite direction, which is, tell me what's going on, where does it hurt? Show me your computer, and you will find something that's an adjacency or right on. And you've experienced this yourself, where like the best piece of information you'll get from some conversation is the last thing they say. It's like right at the end of the meeting, at 29th minute of the meeting, you're like, oh yeah, thanks for chatting. Oh, I have to go to this horrible meeting where our accounting system doesn't work with our invoicing system, but you wouldn't really care about that. You're working on this other thing. I'm like, no, I super care about that. Please tell me. You're like, why did we wait till the very end? So I'm just trying to shortcut to that moment as much as possible.
Do you think that that's what's required to build something good?
If people are really good at guessing what people want, I encourage them to do so. And I think sometimes you need to invent something that isn't exactly what your customer asked for, of course. All the normal car versus faster horses. But that comes from really knowing that people want to go from place A to B quickly. So maybe you have personal intuition, that's fantastic. Maybe you're in some completely futuristic R&D effort that has no grounding in reality. I'm not sure that directly listening to customers leads you to reusable rocket SpaceX. Though, actually, I take that back. Everyone was complaining about, people who needed to put things in space seemed to complain about the cost of going to space and the safety of it. And so presumably reusable rockets that have a high reliability drops the cost and are safer. So in some ways that's deeply listening to the customer and seems to have solved, or is on its way to solving a problem that was unmet. So I don't know if there sort of is another way. I would say all the other ways I can think of are much higher risk and involve a lot of guessing, and given finite time on the planet, I just unwilling to spend it on guessing when our customers are so smart and they're just like willing to tell us mostly what they want, and then it's up to us for the creativity to figure out how to do it well. But the pain I really want from their voice. But I'm a zealot of this topic. It's totally in the bloodstream for me.
My other question is do you think that the industry or great builders or whatever are getting better at this? Or has it always been that only the few really listen and understand their users.
You can look at the results of the market, and a small number of companies are measured in the hundreds of billions or trillions. Certainly those ones have listened to their customers and seem to be doing incredibly well. I guess no one was directly asking for 2-day shipping from Amazon, but now we all have it. And maybe we weren't asking directly for AirPods, but now as soon as people don't have them, they rip $300 out of their pocket and buy them as quickly as humanly possible. So there are definitely examples that showcase incredible returns and incredible impact to that level of long-term customer focus and polish and care and the consistency to make something better year after year after year after year in what seems like incremental ways, but when they're cumulative, look gigantic over time. I think that it is contagious to want to build great things. And so you can kind of dilute yourself if you're around people who are motivated by something other than shipping software that people love, or building a product people love, or making a meal that people love, or a film people love. You know, you can talk about what you're gonna do. Some people get excited about that, or you can make some presentation that's great for your boss and you can get excited about that. But once you get the feeling of building something and getting it out to another human and seeing them use it, it's so fun, it's so contagious, you want to do it and you want to be around more people like that. Some companies have a lot of talent density. It's not because they're so much better at recruiting or they pay so much more money, it's that great people want to work with great people and they want to do so for some long period of time. And so once you find that one of these pockets exists, of course you're going to want to flock to it because the rest of the world is like not that fun to work on. I try not to use words like quality actually because it feels exclusionary, you know, because I don't think of myself as like, you know, a person might not think of themselves as I generate quality, or like I have a quality bar, or I can make things that are feel like craft or beauty. That's for designers, that's for others. But we try to use the phrase surprisingly great, which is, it solved the problem and it did so in a way that was surprisingly great. It wasn't out of the topic. It wasn't added on. It was actually what the solution was surprisingly great. I was able to solve my problem in a way that made me smile a bit, and not because they just sent me a popcorn gift. Afterwards, it was actually about the solution. And that is not about purely UI design. That could be anything. That could be the text in the welcome email. That could be shaving off a step. That could be just making it load faster. And that phrasing, I think, has made it more inclusionary about building something of high quality, because it doesn't feel that I have to come from the design organization or the copywriting desk or expert in our brand guidelines to be able to execute it. I can just bring my own voice to make something surprisingly great. I really worry about people who are picking startup ideas in which the problems are not super painful and the alternatives are quite good. Well, first of all, very difficult problem for you to win at. And two, does the world really need you? Right? We have a lot of solutions to this. Whereas, again, there are problems in the world that are extremely painful and the solutions are horrible. And so I'm not saying you should do just better than the terrible, but if you make something surprisingly great for a painful thing in which all the solutions are horrible, you get some pretty good outcomes. Yeah.